All right, all right. Welcome to the empty room where silence holds secrets and darkness whispers truths. I'm your host, Victor Zane, and together we'll explore those peculiar spaces that exist just beyond the corner of your eye, the places that shouldn't be there, but are. Every week we venture into abandoned halls, forgotten rooms, and spaces that exist in that unsettling realm between here and nowhere. We'll investigate the stories of those who have encountered something and nothing, who've heard voices in the silence, and who have seen shadows move in empty corners. Whether you're a skeptic seeking answers or a believer searching for validation, the empty room invites you to step through the doorway with us. But remember, sometimes the most terrifying thing isn't what you find in an empty room, it's what finds you. What's going on, everybody? How am I sounding out there? Hopefully, I'm coming across very good. I'm your host, Victor Zane, and tonight we will be exploring five of the most persistent and popular cryptids that haunt the edges of our maps and our minds. Those aren't just tales from the campfire. Each of these creatures has been seen, feared, even worshiped across the generations. What follows are their stories and the people who swear by them. How am I sounding out there, everybody? Pretty good? All right. Awesome. So, the first one, let's begin our adventure. The first one, the Mothman, the harbinger of doom. Our journey begins in Point Pleasant, West Virginia. The year 1966. A strange creature begins to haunt the skies over this sleepy town. They call it the Mothman. Tall, winged, and with piercing red eyes, Mothman was first seen on November 15th by two young couples out for a drive near the abandoned TNT plant. Roger and Linda Scarberry and Steve and Mary Mallet saw what they described as a giant humanoid with wings and glowing eyes. It chased their car at over 100 miles per hour, gliding and not flapping its wings. Some describe this harbinger of doom with the huge wings like a bat. Its eyes also glow red in the dark. Many sightings were reported as having the feeling of dread and death and the fear of being killed. Other sightings mention this monster, following them all the way back to town and even their houses before disappearing into the darkness. All right. More sightings followed, but on December 15th, 1967, tragedy struck. The Silver Bridge that crosses the West Virginia and Ohio borders collapsed during rush hour, killing 46 people. Numerous reports of a moth like creature standing as tall as 8 feet was sighted. Many believed it was a warning, a harbinger of disaster and what could come for the future. Others say it's an omen of change, a sentinel watching our fate unfold in front of our very eyes. Whatever it was, the accounts that came from that event sent shockwaves through local communities thereafter. Okay. So the first one we're going to talk about is the Mothman. Hopefully, I'm sounding a little bit better out there. You guys can hear me a little bit better. So, the lore behind the Mothman. Now, the Mothman has been seen predominantly in the West Virginia, Ohio area. There has been other sightings across the United States to include some on the West Coast, but mainly, believe it or not, a lot of the sightings on the West Coast pertain to big cities and not the countryside like you would think. Some people have seen a Mothman on bridges. Some people have seen them on buildings, and some people, of course, have seen them out in the wilderness. Ladies and gentlemen that are in chat listening to the show, please give us some emojis, give us some likes, have the chat going inside the chat room there. Please feel free to explore, ask any questions that you might have, or say anything that you would like to in regards to the topic we are on. Every little excerpt helps us bump our show up in the search engines, not only on Podbean, but on all the local outlets that we belong to include iHeartRadio and Spotify. So the Mothman, he's often described as a humanoid figure, standing between 6 and 8 foot tall, with a broad wingspan. Sometimes the wingspan's 10 to 12 feet or more. Witnesses consistently mention the glowing red eyes, two round circular red eyes, about as big as baseballs. Now, they have also reported that when you stare into these eyes, you get a feeling of dread, and often people are paralyzed where they cannot move. Witnesses also say that the creature has been seen mostly in small towns, but some sightings have, like I mentioned before, were in big cities. And of course, the biggest case it was in 1967 on December 15th at the Silver Bridge. And that's a bridge that crosses the West Virginia and Ohio borders. Again, the creature was first sighted in the 1960s in Point Pleasant, West Virginia. Now, Point Pleasant, West Virginia is a small town nestled near an abandoned munitions facility known as the TNT area. Some local legends link Mothman to Native American curses. A lot of the Native Americans in the region, including the Ohio, Pennsylvania, um, West Virginia Valley area, have said and have often talked about the winged man bringing curses with him anywhere and everywhere that he goes. Now, that's kind of interesting because um, Chief Cornstalk, who was murdered in 1777, had also talked about this area in Point Pleasant, West Virginia, as being cursed lands, um, cursed by the Mothman. Of course, back then they didn't call it the Mothman; they called it the Man with Wings, and that was the Native American um, kind of a little bit of a Native American urban legend about that. But I mean, as far back as the 1700s, the Mothman, especially in Native American lore, was known. Of course, others view it as a supernatural omen. Wherever Mothman appears, disaster always seems to follow. Again, this belief gained traction after the collapse of the Silver Bridge in December of 1967, which almost 50 people were killed. Sightings ceased almost entirely after the disaster for many decades after, leading many to believe the Mothman was a prophetic entity rather than a physical creature. So let's look at this a little bit more in depth as far as the Mothman is concerned. In more fringe circles, the Mothman is thought to be an interdimensional being. Now, we're going to talk about this a little bit more in the show later on when we talk about um, more cryptids. And one thing that we often associate these cryptids with is being interdimensional beings. Thank you, Sen, for that. I hope you're enjoying your hike today, my love. Some people think that the Mothman and some other cryptids can go interdimensionally between one plane of existence to another or between different realities or parallel universes. So that is one of the, fringe beliefs about the Mothman. As a matter of fact, that's one of the fringe beliefs about many of these cryptids. Many believe he also is a harbinger summoned by government psyops. Yeah, I didn't think that when I first read about the Mothman and I was doing some of my research on the Mothman. One of the things that really intrigued me was um, created by, of course, there was which we're going to do a podcast on a particular island. I'm not going to give it away right now because I want it to be a surprise for everybody. But this island was known to have human experimentations on it, and some of these human slash um, animal hybrids that came from it were actually released out into the world, or so to speak. And this has been attributed to a government cover up. Thank you, everybody, for the coffees and the cakes and everything in the room. I appreciate it, all the gifts. So it kind of was when I was looking at this, I was thinking about like, the interdimensional beings, the travel between the different parallel universes and everything. That's fringe. You hear that all the time, but it struck me kind of odd about the psyops theory. Of course, anything is possible. And another one, is the last one that I put on here. Even a collective hallucination triggered by electromagnetic anomalies near the TNT site. Now, they've done some investigations around that area, and I'm going to go into this a little bit more here in just a second. But around that TNT area, there's a lot of electromagnetic um, activity. There's also been some reports of paranormal activities, ghosts and spirits and so on and so forth in that area. So you look at all the paranormal hype that's behind that, and all of the electromagnetic, possibly the atmosphere around that area, that very well could attribute to hallucinations because electromagnetic fields, especially if you are in one that's very heavily done, that's very heavily attributed to EM activity, you do tend to have hallucinations, headaches, and feeling dreary and tired, and so on and so forth. I remember some of the investigations we used to go on, not the sidebar here, but this pertains to this electromagnetic theory. We went to a person's house upstate Pennsylvania. It was about 3 hours from here. It's called Bradford, about 4 hours actually from here. And one thing that we noticed was we used to call these things EMF cages, electromagnetic frequency cages. This guy had things plugged into a strip. He had strips. He had what we called daisy chained the strips, the power strips together, and had had plugs upon plugs upon plugs, and he had it completely around his house. Not only that, he had it around his bed, he had it everywhere he sat. And it was kind of odd because a lot of these experiences that he had was attributed to these places where these high EMF readings were taking place. So, yeah, I agree. Leslie says she thinks the whole electromagnetic topic is very interesting. And who knows? That very well may be what the case is, because if there's a lot of electromagnetic activity around that area, around the munitions area, it very well could lead you into hallucinating. One of the things that we found out during our paranormal experiences is if there's a lot of electromagnetic frequencies in the area, it tends to give you headaches. Number one, it tends to give you hallucinations. Number two, and number three, it tends to give you a feeling of dread and tiredness. And that's some of the scientific evidence that we had, perhaps were privy to during our investigation. So that makes sense, and that lends to some credibility on that electromagnetic theory for the Mothman. So if you were to pick one of those three, tell me in chat, which one do you think would be the most prevalent one in your mind, or what do you think could be the explanation? He could be an interdimensional being. It could be a harbinger summoned by the government psyops, or it could be a collective hallucination, triggered by the electromagnetic anomalies near the TNT site, the munitions site. I think myself, if I was to put anything on that particular area, I would say perhaps, and again, a lot of these areas that they actually did have Mothman sightings, except for the ones way out in the woods. So you can't really attribute the ones like the two young couples that I'm about to talk about. They were out in the middle of the woods. So then, if you want to attribute that to high electromagnetic frequency and you're out in the middle of the woods where there is little to no electromagnetic frequency, or if there is, and you might be onto something there. But a lot of these other places where, like out in the middle of the woods, they don't have high EMF fields, so to speak. And so maybe that last one that I think might have attributed to that sighting during the Sapphire Bridge collapse could very well be attributed to the high concentrations of EMF in that area. So, what do you think? Tell me in chat. What do you think? And of course, comment later on the show. Now, for those of you listening in, remember this is a live show. You can share it, okay? But later on, do not share it after the show is over. Do not share this link after the show is over, because this is a live program. And how Podbean works is I have to actually um, enable it to produce the show and to push the show out to the airwaves. So this is a live version. This live link that I share today will be deleted on all my social media outlets when the show is done. Afterwards, a link will be supplied for the show once it is posted on Podbean. So remember that, ladies and gentlemen. You can share the show out right now if you want to, and by all means do that. But once this link goes dead, or once this show is over, do not share this particular link. I will share a show link later on, or once it's posted here in Podbean, you can share that link. So, November 15th, 1966, two young couples, Roger and Linda Scarberry, and Steve and Mary Mallet, they were driving near the TNT area late at night. Now they were going from having dinner and going home. They spotted what they first assumed was a large bird. They thought maybe a hawk or an eagle, because eagles are pretty prevalent in that area. And if you ever seen an eagle is quite large, especially the ones up in the mountain regions where they can span their wing lengths of 10 or 12 feet. However, as it rose into the air, they saw it had a humanoid body. And the thing that stood out the most was those glowing red eyes. And of course, the immense wings. The creature chased their car. They sped away, trying to get away from it, exceeding 100 miles per hour. This thing, this Mothman, quote unquote, kept pace without flapping its wings with the car. And the couples, when they reported this, were visibly shaken. One of them was sick. I think one of the females were sick, and they were visibly shaken. And when they reported the encounter to Deputy Millard Halstead, they also passed a polygraph, and they stuck to their story for decades. Over the next 13 months, over 100 sightings were reported, some by the same police officers and the same respected townsfolk that had doubted the story from the beginning. So, the real question here is, what do you think the Mothman is? And do you think it's real, or do you think it's just urban legend? Leslie says, Victor, it is true they can cause EMPs with the HARP station pulling in the Earth's magnetic field. I've seen stories where those EMPs affect animals and human behaviors. Yes, but EMPs are different than EMF, Leslie. That's an electromagnetic pulse, whereas an electromagnetic frequency is a little bit different. But yeah, I see what you're saying in that. I don't disagree. Chris L says the Earth does have electromagnetic fields naturally. You're right. Ley lines are a part of that. So I agree with you on that. And Roxanne Gerard says, I'm thinking interdimensional because how would so many people describe similar things? Yeah, very good point. All good points. But what do you think the Mothman is? And where do you think the Mothman comes from? Tell me down in the chat, ladies and gentlemen. And those of you listening afterwards, please feel free to comment wherever it is you are listening to. Now, let's head out west to the deep forests of the Pacific Northwest, where whispers tell of a towering beast covered in hair, walking upright and vanishing without a trace. Bigfoot, or Sasquatch, isn't just North America's favorite cryptid, it is the most iconic cryptid in America. In 1967, Roger Patterson and Bob Gimlin were riding horses near Bluff Creek, California, when they spotted something incredible. Patterson jumped off his horse, filmed what many still consider the most compelling cryptid footage in history. A large, muscular, hair-covered creature walking away from the camera. It even turned to look. Now, is it a hoax? Was it a man in a costume or something more? Native American stories of wild men in the woods predate European colonization all the way back again in the 1700s. So could Bigfoot be a relic hominid, a leftover cousin from humanity's tangled tree? Or again, is it another interdimensional being? So the location of Bigfoot is all over America and Canada, and even in Europe. They have different names for them in Europe, and they're quite smaller over there. But mostly concentrated in the sightings on the Pacific Northwest. Now, we've had some sightings here in Pennsylvania. As a matter of fact, if you go to www.theemptyroom747.com, we actually have a live it looks like the Earth. We have UFO sightings and we have Bigfoot sightings. You click on the drop down menu, click on Bigfoot sightings. You can actually zoom it into your area, and it'll tell you and show you where all the reported sightings for Bigfoot or Sasquatch were in those areas, and it'll tell you the time and dates. Now they got them all the way back from the 1960s to present. So feel free to go to the site, check out that drop down link, and it'll take you to both the UFO sightings and the Bigfoot sightings. It's very neat. You could spin the world around, look over in Europe, look over anywhere in the world where there is a UFO, or I'm sorry, where there is a UFO or a Bigfoot sighting. We're talking about Bigfoot right now, but if you click on the Bigfoot link, it'll take you anywhere in the world where there was a sighting past and present. And it'll tell you, and some of it will give you some really detailed information as to what the sighting was, when it occurred, how they felt, the whole 9 yards. So don't forget about that. Go to the website. Yeah, again, it's a work in progress, but we're getting there. But new stuff's being added every couple of weeks on there. So and stay tuned for some more articles coming out. There's some good articles on there right now. A couple that we'll be talking about here within the next couple of weeks. So, locations all over America and Canada, but mostly, like I said, concentrate on the Pacific West Coast, Northwest, Washington, Oregon, Northern California, and of course, in British Columbia. Now, the funny thing about this is reports actually date back centuries. There's actually hieroglyphs on a lot of the caves in the Northwest that depict this hominid like cryptid on cave walls that were painted way, way back in the day. So, hundreds and thousands of years, Bigfoot's been actually in the forefront or has been seen. This is the only cryptid that goes back and dates back literally centuries, and that has been actually equated or have has been like you see hieroglyphs or hieroglyphs however you pronounce it, or you see writings or anything cave paintings. All of these things depict back hundreds and thousands of years ago depict Bigfoot or Sasquatch. Now, a little bit of the lore behind Sasquatch. The name Sasquatch originates from the Coast Salish word Sasquatch, meaning wild man. Native tribes across North America have stories of a large, hairy forest dweller. Sometimes they call them spiritual protectors, sometimes they call them menacing abductors. Now, a Bigfoot is typically described as being 7 to 10 feet tall, covered in dark brown or black hair, has massive feet, of course, hence the name Bigfoot, and leaving tracks sometimes up 24 inches long. Now, here, some believe Bigfoot is a relic hominid species like Gigantopithecus, all right, from our old time, maybe the missing link. You've heard that. Perhaps they say Bigfoot might be part of our genomes from back in the day, part of our DNA, but the missing link that's in our DNA. That's one theory. Another theory is it's a non human primate, okay, developed from, we'll say, the ape family. And the third, which is becoming more mainstream than ever right now, is a supernatural being, either one, summoned by UFOs, or two, capable of vanishing and doing interdimensional travel. Now, you see the correlation between the Mothman and Bigfoot so far, correct? Both are known or have been rumored to be interdimensional travelers. So that's kind of interesting. Um, I've never seen one myself. It's really weird. Modern Bigfoot lore kind of exploded in the 20th century, especially with alleged sightings. You know, all the footprint casts and audio recordings of the eerie howls and screams, and people talking about being rocks being thrown at them and big branches, and you can hear the cracks and the howls and the screams in the middle of the night. Now, I have an interesting, um, I guess, experience in regard to Bigfoot. Now, whether or not it was one, I don't know, but it kind of lines up with what people say Bigfoot does. Now, my father and I, back in the day, we used to hunt. Um, and we were out in the mountains. I decided to go off on my own, and I was tracking a herd of deer. So we were archery hunting. He went off way out on the mountain range to the left and to the east, and I went up on the mountain range to the west. Okay, now this was here in Pennsylvania, and we're way up in the literally out in the middle of nowhere. Of course, we know our way around. We're woodsmen. I'm always I was as a kid. I was out in the woods by myself up in the mountains. I'd ride my horses up in the mountains. I'd play in the mountains. It was, to me, it was second nature. So the woods was kind of like my home. All right, still is. So I'm not thinking anything of it because I'm quite at home and I'm quite calm when I am sitting or when I'm doing anything in the woods. I started hearing this big crash. It started getting to be dusk and I was heading back. And I got up almost three quarters of the way back. I see my dad in the distance. He was flashing his light so I could see him. And I was like, all right, there he is. He's probably about 2 miles away from me. You could see it across the field, probably about a mile or two away from me. and we were in the valley and we're coming down off the mountain, and all of a sudden I heard this big crash, like it almost sounded like a Mack truck or some type of truck ran into the woods and just crunched a whole bunch of trees. So I stopped, and again, I only had my bow on me, and I turned around. I'm like, okay, maybe this is a bear coming down through the woods. I got to be careful. Back then, you didn't have bear spray. Now, I did carry a pistol on me. Okay, it was a 9 millimeter. Of course, 9 millimeter is not going to do much to a bear. It'll piss it off, probably, probably tick it off a little bit, and maybe hopefully deter it. But I wasn't thinking Bigfoot. I wasn't thinking Sasquatch. I wasn't thinking anything sinister. I was thinking there was a bear. I thought, okay, well, I need to start beat feeding and be careful and watch where I'm going because it is getting dark and the bear can smell me and see me before I'll even see it in the dark. Now I had a flashlight. I had enough stuff to at least defend myself out there if anything did happen, if it was wildlife, so to speak. But again, you kind of get shook up because you're out there by yourself and you feel like crap, this big bear's running through the woods. That's what's going through my head. Then it got quiet. And if you're ever in the woods, you notice one thing right off the bat when the wildlife stops moving. Excuse me, when the wildlife stops moving, when the wildlife, like the birds and so on and so forth, when you don't hear a peep and it goes dead silent in the woods, you notice it. You notice it right off the bat. If you're a woodsman or a woods woman, if you're out there in the woods and you're used to hiking and doing things out in the wilderness, you notice when the woods gets quiet, and it was definitely quiet. And the hairs in the back of my neck started standing up. And I was like, wait a second. Now I feel like somebody's following me. And I'm sitting there thinking in my head, is this bear stalking me? But I'm like, wait, no, that's not what bears do. They're not stalkers. I mean, at least not black bear. And it's not what they do. They usually just meander on. Once they find it's a human, they meander on their own way. If you're not bother them, they don't bother you. So now I'm feeling like I'm being stalked. So I walked a little bit, then I stopped, and I heard this behind me. And it was like somebody in heavy boots was hitting the ground. It was like boof, boof, boof. But it was like really, it wasn't exactly quiet, but it wasn't as if it was like breaking branches, breaking crap. It was trying to be as stealthy as it could be. Now, if you weren't paying attention, you probably wouldn't even have heard this. Oh no, I'm sure it wasn't. um, anyhow, Chris asks, "Are you sure it wasn't a bear chuffing, chafing or chuffing?" I can't remember. I can't see what he's saying. But no, I'm almost positive it wasn't a bear at that time. Well, I did think about it before, but about that time, I was still thinking there was a bear. But then I got thinking in my head, no, bears don't do this. They don't follow you. Number one, and if they do follow you, it's usually the younger ones. They'll follow because out of curiosity. But if it's an older bear, if it's a bigger bear, and it didn't sound like a small bear, it didn't sound like a small animal. Um, normally they just go about their own way, their own business, and we don't have grizzlies where we're at, so I don't have to worry about that stuff. So I got to thinking, okay, maybe it's a mountain lion. All right, maybe I got a mountain lion on my butt. And I'm like, well, wait a second. I'm kind of far away from where this should be, but it's not impossible to find one. So then now I started to get a little bit scared. I'm like, all right, a mountain lion's a whole different animal. The more I went towards dad, the more seemed like it was closer and closer to me. Now, about this time, it was getting a little bit dark. Again, the sun just went down over the horizon, over the mountaintop. And I stopped, shined my flashlight, and I caught a pair of eyes. You know how the eyes reflect in the middle, when the nighttime comes and if you hit something, an animal or whatever, and the eyes will reflect off the light. I hit something really quick, and it just like turned itself. Whatever it was huge, and all I seen was this big black mass. And then I heard this blood curdling scream. I don't know how to describe it. It was so loud, my dad heard it a half a mile down the valley. I started bolting. I took off running. I started, I cocked my 9 millimeter back. I had my knife. I was like, whatever this thing is, if it's going to get me, I'm shooting it. No, I didn't say mountain lions weren't in Pennsylvania. I said they weren't in the area that I was in, or they weren't reported to be in the area that I was in. However, I'm running, and I get to my dad, and my dad turns around. He goes, "What the hell was that?" And I said, "I don't know, but it's following me." So the whole time back, we had about another couple of miles until we got back to the truck. We got the whole time we got back to the truck, there was these little rocks or probably big handfuls of, like they're like a big rock. We'd have problems throwing a rock that far. But what was ever doing that was throwing these rocks as like boom, and the rock would fall and hit right next to it. One of them actually hit my dad, and we thought it was somebody messing around. So my dad started yelling, said, yelling expletives, saying, "We're going to shoot you. We have guns. We're not afraid to fire. You keep throwing rocks at us, we're going to shoot you." Then the rocks stopped. However, when we finally made it back to the truck, now we knew this thing was following us, because when we made it back to the truck, we heard this big crash, like something broke a tree in half. And next thing you know, there was this log that just got thrown at us. And luckily, it just missed the truck. And it was probably about 20 feet in front of the truck. Dad said, "Get in the truck. We're getting the hell out of here." He had his rifle in the truck, so he loaded his rifle up, and we got gone. We never talked about it since. It was just one of those things where you and your dad look at each other and go, "What the hell just happened?" So that's my real life encounter of a Bigfoot. Now I'm going to give you a real life sighting back in 1967. Bluff Creek, California, as I mentioned before, was probably one of the most prominent sightings in the history of Bigfoot sightings. Roger Patterson and Bob Gimlin were horseback riding when they spotted a large, hairy creature walking upright along the creek bed. Patterson jumped off his horse and filmed the now famous Patterson Gimlin film. The creature appears female with visible breasts and briefly turns its head towards the camera before disappearing and running into the trees. Now, the footage has been studied for decades. Experts have pointed out the anatomical detail and natural gait as being difficult to fake at that time with any costume, especially in 1967. Of course, skeptics claim it's a man in a suit, but no one has definitely debunked it or identified it to this very day as a hoax. And of course, if you go on YouTube or you go on any social media, you'll see a plethora of other videos or other um, sightings attributed to Bigfoot. Now, a lot of those videos that you see, you could tell are fake or staged some way, somehow. And now that people have drones, which I would like to do one day, is go up in the Alleghenies where a lot of these sightings have taken place and take a drone with me, survey the area while we are hiking the area and see if we can't see anything while we are hiking. As a matter of fact, my partner and I, who is in the chat, we're going to a Bigfoot festival. I believe it's in the end of May, and we're going to go check it out. And I believe it has a night hike, and we're going to try to enroll and see if we can't go on a night hike, searching for Bigfoot with them. So that will be fun. So, fact, fiction, is it just another interdimensional being? What are your thoughts? Tell us what you think in the comments below. Now, let's head across the Atlantic Ocean, where in the cold, dark waters of the Loch Ness in Scotland, Nessie, the Loch Ness monster, is no stranger to fame. The tale begins as far back as 565 AD, when St. Columba is said to have banished a water beast in an epic battle in the River Ness. But it was in 1934 that the world took notice when Dr. Robert Wilson's now infamous photograph appeared in a newspaper. The long neck and head broke the surface of what Nessie, or Old Nessie as they call her, and that image has captivated millions, even today. Unfortunately, later on in the years ahead, it was later exposed as a hoax. However, today at the present time, sonar scans and eyewitness accounts continue to fuel belief. And in 2011, a boat captain caught something large, solid, and moving on sonar just beneath the surface of his lake following his boat. So, what lurks in the depths of Loch Ness? Is it a prehistoric survivor, misidentified wildlife, or something beyond science, or just a big log, or a big fish? So, this is in the Highlands of Scotland, the Loch Ness Lake. The earliest record of this was in the 6th century, 565 AD. There was this big depiction of St. Columba banishing a water beast in the River Ness. Now, Nessie is described as a long-necked, serpent-like aquatic creature resembling a plesiosaur, a dinosaur long thought extinct. The first recorded story comes in 565 AD in the life of Saint Columba. According to legend, Columba encountered a water beast in the River Ness, fought it, and commanded it in the name of God to retreat, which it did. Over the centuries, stories persisted of a monster in the deep, dark waters of the 23-mile-long loch. Now, we call them lakes, they call them lochs. The depth, murkiness, and unusual sonar readings have kept the legend alive today. No, Leslie, it wasn't Jaws. So, modern theories. Here's modern theories behind the Loch Ness Monster, Old Nessie. Some believe it's just misidentified sturgeons or eels. Some believe it's just an optical illusion and maybe wave formations. Some believe it's just big logs or some type of debris that often when they take pictures, can be attributed to debris. And again, here we go. Can you guess what's coming up next, ladies and gentlemen? Can you just guess? Nessie is often rumored to also be an intradimensional creature. You see a pattern here between all of these cryptids that we're talking about. Which one do you think it is? Now, let's talk about the sturgeons and eels. That one is a very feasible, because we all know that that sturgeons get quite large. So do eels. All right, and some can be misconstrued. Um, Optical illusions of wave formations. I'm not sure about that. I've never had I've never had optical illusions on the lake, so to speak. I have when we were out in the ocean. But as far as any lake, like optical effects or anything like that, as far as seeing things I don't think is there, or seeing things that might not be there, I've never had that encounter or something like that. So I can't say anything. But wave formations might be a possible scenario as well, because you can see a wave come over, and from the distance, when you take a picture, it might look like something that is described like Nessie or some type of creature. Interdimensional creature, interdimensional traveler. Well, it seems like every single one we've talked about tonight fits that criteria, or has been rumored to be an interdimensional traveler. So who knows? Who knows? Now, Leslie asked in chat, doesn't the Loch Ness monster stand high in the air? I am not sure about that. I didn't read anything about it flying into the air or standing in the air. There are rumors and reports that there are pictures of it being on the ground, coming out to sun itself or whatever on the beach at different parts of the lake. But as far as standing high in the air, I'm not sure about that at all. I'll have to look into that, and I'll get an answer back for you on that. But so again, the interdimensional being, I don't know. I would like to think that a fish can't travel interdimensionally, or a dinosaur for that matter can't travel interdimensionally. Of course, then again, we're talking about Mothman and Bigfoot. That's fitting in the same category as well. So who knows? Everybody that you're listening to the show, thanks for listening to the show. Make sure you're sharing it. All right, we're about halfway through. Make sure you're sharing the show. Even after the show, when we post it, please share it out to people. Put something on your Facebook post, your social media, and to draw people here. Don't just leave it your description blank. say something that you enjoyed the show. Tell them what you enjoyed about the show and tell them what they might want to hear that this show has to offer. So when you share the show, please make sure that you're also promoting the show for us because word of mouth is our biggest fan right now. And you listening here are our biggest fans. Thank you. So, real life sighting, April 1934. It's called The Surgeon's Photograph. We just talked about that. Dr. Robert Kenneth Wilson submitted a photo to the Daily Mail showing what appeared to be a head and neck protruding from the lock. The image became the icon of the Nessie myth until 1994, almost 60 years later, over 60 years later, when it was revealed as a hoax involving a toy submarine and clay floaty. You got to admit, back in 1934, if he did that, took that picture, and that was indeed a hoax, that was a pretty elaborate hoax to have people fooled for 60 years. I mean, that's pretty damn good. He died before it ever got deemed a hoax. So that's kind of interesting. So you think about it, it took that long for people to realize that this guy just set this up as a hoax. Now, there's still other sightings that have persisted. In 1972, a sonar expedition picked up a large moving object beneath the surface. This was a military vessel that did this. Fishermen from all through the ages, especially recently, that have been utilizing sonar have been picking up rather large objects following their boats. In 2011, Captain Marcus Atkinson reported a sonar image showing a 5-foot wide object following his boat 75 feet below the surface for 10 minutes at about 30 feet long. I'm sorry, 20 feet long. Still, a 20-foot long creature in a lake that's 5 foot wide following your craft is quite interesting. Now, is Nessie real? Now, again, if you go on the web, if you go on the interwebs, you'll see a plethora of different videos, a plethora of different pictures, some real, some proposed to be real, some you can, of course, irrefutably know that's fake. And with AI out there today, it's very hard to discern truth from reality or fiction from reality. So, all I can say in regards to that is when you do research on these cryptids, if you decide to go back and look at some of these real life sightings or real life stuff that happened to these people, in researches, just keep in mind that, when you do this, you'll also see more modern type stuff and very well may run into a lot of fake, stuff that was put together out there, that was manufactured, that was fabricated by people out there that just want to get views. So keep that in mind. Unfortunately, that's the drawback of having the information of knowledge or the information highway. So, uh, Roxy said, that's hilarious. And Leslie said, that might be why I thought it stood higher. I may have seen that and didn't hear it was a hoax. Yeah, possibly, Mom. So, sonars today are picking it up. People are also reporting now sightings on beaches, that they've seen the creature on beaches, and the creature has flippers like a turtle. If it has the body and flippers of a turtle and the neck, of course, of a dinosaur. And again, they attribute it to the dinosaur way back in the dinosaur age. So, is it a hoax? Is Nessie real? Or is this some just fabricated story from all the way back in 565 AD that people just has decided to capitalize on? What are your thoughts, ladies and gentlemen? Tell me in the chat down below or wherever you are listening. All right, now let's bring it back stateside to the haunted woods of New Jersey's Pine Barrens, the Jersey Devil. The legend begins in 1735 with Mother Leeds, a woman burdened with her 13th child. In a moment of despair, she cursed it and yelled, "Let this one be the devil!" The child was purportedly born a monster. It had wings, it had hooves, it had a goat's head. It shrieked and flew up the chimney. For nearly 300 years, the Jersey Devil has been blamed for livestock mutilations, eerie cries in the woods, and hoof prints found on rooftops, even in the wintertime. In January 1909, hysteria gripped the region. Hundreds of sightings poured in. Police shot at the creature. Schools even closed, and even the Philadelphia Zoo offered a $10,000 reward for the capture or evidence that the Jersey Devil exists. Is this mass hysteria or a genuine encounter with something cursed? Now, location Pine Barrens, New Jersey. It originated in the early 18th century. The legend around this is that the woman named Mother Leeds was pregnant with her 13th child. She cursed the Pines Barren community during birth in frustration, of course, declaring, "Let this one be the devil." It was a stormy night in 1735. She was rumored to give birth to a deformed child that said to have wings, hooves, and a goat's head, and a forked tail. This was actually written in the archives. It's kind of interesting. It was also reported as shrieking, and it killed the midwife, and it attempted to fly up the chimney to escape the house and into the woods. The creature has haunted the Pine Barrens ever since. Now, the Pine Barrens is a million-acre stretch of forest with a long history of supernatural tales. Sightings over the centuries describe eerie screeches in the night, hoof prints on rooftops during snowstorms, and livestock mutilations. Now, some claim it's a misidentified sandhill crane. Well, if there's a lot of misidentified sandhill cranes running around with hoofs, we got to double check that. All right. Again, some of it identified as a cryptic relic, urban legend, so to speak. And can you think about the next one? What do you think's going to be the next theory behind it? An interdimensional traveler. Now, you have to look back. You have to look at patterns in certain things, okay? And the pattern with a lot of these cryptids is the belief system behind it is that these are interdimensional beings. Now, this is actual written documentation from Pine Barrens from whoever was in charge at the time. I'm sure the community was small. Of course, they probably over exaggerated a lot of stuff because the belief systems back then were there was witches and warlocks and all this other stuff. And we all know about the Salem witch trials. We all know about all of that. Now, 13 kids is a lot of kids. All right. But again, families were big back then because you had to have big families to run the farms. You had to have big families to take care of the farmsteads and so on and so forth in the family. So having 10 to 12 children or 5 to 10 children wasn't uncommon back in those days. So what do you think it is? All right. So let's fast forward a little bit further down the road to 1909, the Jersey Devil Panic. Over a week, hundreds of people across New Jersey and Pennsylvania reported seeing a winged creature. In Bristol, New Jersey, police officers claimed they fired on it with no effect. In Camden and Trenton, trolley operators saw the beast. Schools actually closed due to the widespread panic. Strange hoof prints were found in the snow on rooftops and across the fields where the police shot at them, and of course, where people had seen and reported seeing this creature with wings. Now, the mass hysteria was so intense that the Philadelphia Zoo offered a $10,000 reward for its capture. Yeah, it was Santa's reindeer. No, it was Santa's crane, crane deer. Yeah, one of the people in the chat, ladies and gentlemen, said, Leslie said it was Santa's reindeer. But it garnered so much attention and so much mass hysteria that it was closing schools down. It was closing whole communities down. And it was so intense that again, I said the Philadelphia Zoo offered a $10,000 reward for its capture. Back then, $10,000 was a lot of money. But to this day, nobody has been able to capture it on video or effectively capture it on video, and nobody has been able to capture it, period. Hmm. So, what do you think it is? Do you think it's in a misidentified sandhill crane? Do you think it's just one of those cryptic relics of urban legend? Or do you think it is an interdimensional traveler? Now, last but not least, let's over to the tropics of Puerto Rico. In 1995, Madeline Tolentino claimed to have seen a creature unlike any she had ever seen or known. A bipedal reptilian figure with dark alien eyes and a spine down its back. They called it the chupacabra. Soon, over 150 animals, soon after, over 150 animals were found dead, drained of blood through tiny puncture wounds. Chupacabra means goat sucker. And I know that a lot of people are going to laugh at that. And the legend spread like wildfire through Latin America and the American Southwest, Texas, Mexico, the border states. In Texas, ranchers have reported strange, hairless canid creatures attacking their livestock. Some were DNA tested. Of course, a lot of them were coyotes with mange, but not all. Some have never been identified on what type of animal they were. So, are we dealing with a sick animal or something designed to hunt silently in the dark? So, the locations of these sightings were in Puerto Rico, Mexico, and the southwestern United States. Now, it's funny that, I'm not trying to get politics into this, but a lot of the border crossings, the coyotes that bring people across our border illegally, have also told of sightings in the desert of the chupacabra. As a matter of fact, a rumor has it from the Border Patrol or from people that I know that worked on the border, that the coyotes, the people who bring the illegals across the border into America, have said that one of the things that they kind of give them the brief on, quote unquote briefing on, is beware of the chupacabra, because if you see it, run from it, because it'll eat you. So even to today, the chupacabra is a creature of legend. So the modern reports are the early 1900s and of course 1990s and onward. So the lore, as we talked about before, chupacabra translate to goat sucker. It's blamed for livestock deaths where animals are completely drained of blood through small, precise puncture wounds, but not eaten. Just the blood being drained, or all of the liquids from the body of the animals were drained. Now the descriptions vary. In Puerto Rico, they're seen as reptilians with glowing eyes and spikes, spiky spines down their back, and it hops like a kangaroo. Whereas in Mexico and Texas, it's more canine-like, resembling a hairless coyote or dog with blue-gray skin, and often seen with having green eyes. Well, it's probably a good thing we aren't all goats, Leslie, because I guess we won't become a target. So, the three theories about chupacabras. Now, these are different, believe it or not. Alien experiments or pets. A diseased coyote, which has been, one of the main things that's attributed to chupacabra sightings, or a military genetic testing gone rogue. Okay. No interdimensional being on that one. I'm surprised. So 4 out of the 5 cryptids so far have had interdimensional traveler in it. And of course, this is the first one that hasn't. However, we've had 2 of them now that have been attributed to military genetic type testing. Okay. So which of the 3 do you think it could be? Now, the myth may also have been influenced by sci-fi popular culture, especially in 1995 with the film Species. If you ever watched in 1995 the film called Species, it talked about the chupacabra in that, which resembles early chupacabra descriptions. So pop culture has made it and brought this to the forefront. So real life sightings, August 1995 in Canavas, Puerto Rico. Madeline Toddolino saw a strange bipedal creature outside her home. It had an oval head, black, green eyes, and scaly skin. She claimed it moved unnaturally fast and had 3 claws on each hand. At the same time of the sighting, that very night, over 150 livestock were dead or reported dead across the island. The animals were found with no blood or no liquids in them, small puncture marks, and no signs of trouble or struggle. In the 2000s, ranchers in Texas began reporting strange, hairless animals attacking chickens and goats. DNA tests later identified some of them as coyotes with a severe mange problem. But many locals insist they saw something different, intelligent, fast, and unafraid of humans, rather. And also, some of the tests that they had taken from some of the animals that were shot dead never made it to the public eye and were not identified as to what they were. So there are some instances where they actually did some DNA testing where they do not know exactly what this chupacabra is. So interesting sightings tonight. So what do you think? Is it an alien experiment or an alien pet? Is it just diseased coyotes with mange? Or is it a military genetic testing gone rogue? What are your thoughts about the chupacabra? So tonight we went over 5 cryptids. 5 different cryptids from all over the world. We've talked about winged omens, stalked with forest phantoms, and stared into ancient waters. What ties them all together? Is it coincidence, culture, or something more primal? Why do these stories persist, even in an age of science, technology, and skepticism? Perhaps it's because we need them. We need what they represent, and that is the unknown. The other, who knows? And in the empty room of our world, where science stops and myth begins, something may still be watching. Thanks for joining us in the empty room this evening. Until next time, keep your eyes open and maybe don't walk in the woods alone. But remember, sometimes the most terrifying thing isn't what you find in an empty room, or in this case, the woods. It's what finds you. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. See you next time.